The handcuffs clicked shut around Marcus Johnson's wrists with a metallic finality that echoed through the stunned silence of Jefferson High School's auditorium. 250 students sat frozen in their seats, watching their student council president being led away by uniformed officers, while the stage lights cast harsh shadows across his bewildered face. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Marcus was supposed to receive the Outstanding Leadership Award in exactly 30 minutes. "This is a mistake," Marcus said, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "I haven't done anything wrong." Officer Martinez looked uncomfortable as he guided the 17-year-old toward the exit, aware that every phone in the auditorium was now recording this moment that would soon explode across social media. "Principal Dr." Sarah Chen stood at the podium, her knuckles white as she gripped the microphone. The morning had started like any other end-of-year celebration. Students had filed into the auditorium wearing their best clothes. Proud parents filled the back rows, and the sweet scent of graduation flowers mixed with nervous excitement. Now, the air felt thick with confusion and outrage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," Dr. Chen announced, though her own voice betrayed her shock. "We will get to the bottom of this immediately." The fluorescent lights above hummed ominously as murmurs rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Teachers exchanged worried glances. Parents pulled out their phones, and students craned their necks to catch a final glimpse of Marcus disappearing through the double doors. It had been exactly 47 minutes earlier when Linda Morrison, known to most as that Karen from the PTA, had burst into the main office with the fury of a woman scorned. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour. Her designer handbag clutched tightly against her chest like armor. Linda's reputation preceded her. She was the mother who demanded to speak to managers, who questioned every grade her daughter received, and who somehow found fault with every school policy that didn't directly benefit her family. "That boy stole money from the student council fund," Linda had declared to Mrs. Rodriguez, the secretary, her voice rising with each word. "I have proof. My daughter Brittany saw him taking cash from the lockbox yesterday after the meeting." Her manicured finger jabbed the air for emphasis, her face flushed with righteous indignation. Mrs. Rodriguez had worked at Jefferson High for 15 years and had seen her share of parent drama. But something about Linda's accusation felt different, more dangerous. "Mrs. Morrison, that's a very serious allegation. Perhaps we should speak with Principal Chen first." "I already called the police," Linda interrupted, checking her gold watch with theatrical precision. "They should be here any minute. That boy needs to learn that actions have consequences, and I won't stand by while he steals from hardworking families who donated to the school." The words hit Mrs. Rodriguez like a physical blow. Marcus Johnson was one of the most respected students at Jefferson High. He maintained a 4.2 GPA while working 20 hours a week at his uncle's auto shop to help support his grandmother. He had transformed the student council from a glorified social club into an organization that had raised $12,000 for local charities in just 1 year. "Mrs. Morrison, there must be some misunderstanding." Mrs. Rodriguez began, but Linda was already heading toward the auditorium, her heels clicking against the polished linoleum with military precision. Dr. Chen received the frantic call from her secretary just as the police cars pulled into the school parking lot, their red and blue lights painting the morning in urgent colors. She had tried to reach the officers before they entered the building, but Linda had positioned herself strategically by the main entrance, directing them toward the auditorium with the confidence of someone who believed she was saving the day. Now, as the auditorium slowly emptied under Dr. Chen's careful supervision, she felt the weight of institutional failure pressing down on her shoulders. How had they allowed this to happen? How had an unsubstantiated accusation resulted in the arrest of one of their finest students during what should have been his moment of triumph? Marcus's best friend, David Kim, lingered near the stage, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by a mixture of anger and disbelief. Dr. Chen, this is insane. Marcus would never steal anything. He literally gives away his lunch money to kids who forget theirs. David's voice carried the raw emotion of someone watching his friend's reputation being destroyed in real time. Dr. Chen nodded grimly, her mind already racing through the steps she needed to take. I know, David, we're going to fix this, but I need you to trust me and let me handle it properly. She watched as David reluctantly joined the stream of students filing out of the auditorium, their excited chatter from earlier replaced by hushed, angry conversations. Within minutes of the arrest, Dr. Chen was on the phone with the district superintendent, the school board president, and the legal department. The student council advisor, Ms. Patterson, had rushed to her office with the lockbox that supposedly contained the missing funds. Her hands shook as she set it on Dr. Chen's desk. I counted everything yesterday after our final meeting, Ms. Patterson said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was exactly $847 in cash from the bake sale, plus the checks from the spring fundraiser. Marcus helped me organize everything before we locked it up. She fumbled with the key, her fingers trembling as she opened the metal box. Dr. Chen watched as Ms. Patterson counted the bills twice, then a third time. The total was exactly what it should be, $847 in cash, plus 6 checks totaling $1,240. Nothing was missing, not a single dollar. Linda Morrison lied, Dr. Chen said quietly, the words hanging in the air like an accusation. She made a false report to the police. The implications of this realization hit her like a tidal wave. Marcus was sitting in a police station right now, probably being processed for a crime that had never occurred. Ms. Patterson sank into the chair across from Dr. Chen's desk, her face pale. Why would she do this? What could she possibly gain from destroying Marcus's reputation? The question echoed through the office, heavy with the weight of unspoken suspicions about Linda's true motivations. Dr. Chen had been an educator long enough to recognize the uncomfortable truth that nobody wanted to acknowledge Linda Morrison had a documented history of complaints against minority students. Last year, she had demanded that Carlos Rivera be removed from the honors program because he was obviously cheating to maintain his grades. The year before, she had insisted that Aisha Thompson couldn't possibly have written her award-winning essay without help. The pattern was as clear as it was disturbing. The phone rang, interrupting Dr. Chen's dark thoughts. It was Detective Williams from the local police department, and his voice carried the tired frustration of someone who had been manipulated into making an arrest he was beginning to regret. Dr. Chen, we've got a problem here, Detective Williams said. The young man we arrested is maintaining his innocence, and frankly, his story is more credible than the accusation. We need to know if any money is actually missing before we proceed with charges. Detective, I'm looking at the cash box right now. Every penny is accounted for. Not only that, but I have a witness who helped count the money yesterday, and the totals match exactly. Dr. Chen's voice carried the authority of someone who had built her career on facts and fairness. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds before Detective Williams spoke again. Are you telling me that Mrs. Morrison filed a false police report? That appears to be exactly what happened, Dr. Chen replied. I'm going to need you to release Marcus immediately, and I think you and I need to have a serious conversation about Linda Morrison's motivations. While Dr. Chen worked to secure Marcus's release. Word of the arrest was spreading through the community like wildfire. Social media posts began appearing within minutes, accompanied by cell phone videos of Marcus being led away in handcuffs. The hashtag #JusticeForMarcus was trending locally before lunch period ended. Marcus's grandmother, Dorothy Johnson, received the call at her job cleaning offices downtown. Her supervisor watched her face crumple as she listened to the details and immediately gave her permission to leave work. Dorothy had raised Marcus since he was 8 years old, after his parents died in a car accident, and she knew with absolute certainty that her grandson was incapable of theft. "That boy saves every penny he earns to help pay for college," Dorothy told her supervisor, tears streaming down her weathered face. "He won't even buy himself new shoes when his old ones have holes. Why would he steal from his own school?" At the police station, Marcus sat in an interview room, his hands folded calmly in his lap, despite the chaos surrounding him. He had answered every question with patience and dignity, providing detailed accounts of his activities over the past week. His composure impressed Detective Williams, who had interviewed enough guilty teenagers to recognize the difference between innocence and deception. "Marcus, help me understand something," Detective Williams said, leaning back in his chair. "Mrs. Morrison claims her daughter saw you taking money from the cash box. If that's not true, why would she say it?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "Sir, I don't want to speak badly about anyone, but Mrs. Morrison has never liked me. She tried to get me removed from student council president last year because she said I was too young and inexperienced for the position. Her daughter Brittany ran against me and lost." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a clear picture in Detective Williams's mind. "Tell me about yesterday's student council meeting. Who was present when you locked up the money?" "Ms. Patterson, myself, David Kim, Sarah Martinez, and Brittany Morrison," Marcus replied. "We always have adult supervision when handling funds, and we always count everything together before locking it up. Everyone present confirmed the total was correct." Detective Williams made a note. "And where was Brittany when you locked the box?" "She stayed after to clean up the meeting room. Ms. Patterson gave her the key to return to the office when she was finished." Marcus paused, a troubling thought crossing his mind. "Sir, you don't think Brittany actually took the money and her mother is trying to blame me? Do you?" Before Detective Williams could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen confirming that all funds were accounted for. He showed the message to Marcus, whose relief was visible as the tension finally left his shoulders. "You're free to go, son," Detective Williams said, standing up. "And I apologize for what you've been put through today. This should never have happened." Dr. Chen was waiting in the police station lobby when Marcus emerged, and she immediately pulled him into a hug that surprised them both. "I am so sorry, Marcus. This was completely unacceptable, and I promise you we're going to make it right." As they drove back to school, Dr. Chen explained her plan to address the situation. "First, we're calling an emergency school board meeting for tonight. The entire community needs to hear the truth about what happened today. Second, we're going to review our policies about how we handle accusations against students. And third, we need to have a serious conversation with Linda Morrison about the consequences of filing false reports." Marcus stared out the window at the familiar streets of his neighborhood, processing the morning's events. "Dr. Chen, do you think this would have happened if I weren't black?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Dr. Chen couldn't ignore. "I don't know, Marcus. But I do know that you deserved better from all of us today, and I'm going to make sure this never happens to any student again." By the time they returned to school, the parking lot was buzzing with activity. Local news vans had arrived, drawn by the social media storm surrounding Marcus's arrest. Parents were arriving to pick up their children early, and reporters were interviewing anyone willing to talk about the morning's events. Dorothy Johnson was waiting in Dr. Chen's office, her eyes red from crying, but her spine straight with determined dignity. When Marcus walked through the door, she rose and embraced him fiercely, whispering prayers of gratitude into his ear. "Baby, are you okay?" she asked, holding his face in her hands and searching for any sign that the experience had broken his spirit. "I'm okay, Grandma," Marcus replied, though they both knew that okay was relative when you'd been arrested for a crime you didn't commit in front of your entire school. "Doctor, Chen says they're going to fix this." Meanwhile, across town, Linda Morrison was discovering that her morning's work was unraveling faster than she had anticipated. The first sign of trouble came when Brittany arrived home from school in tears, confessing that she had been the one to take the money from the student council fund. "I didn't think it would matter," Brittany sobbed, collapsing onto the living room couch. "It was just $40, and I needed it for Chloe's birthday present. I was going to put it back before anyone noticed." The revelation hit Linda like a physical blow, confirming her worst fears about what she had set in motion. "Brittany, what are you talking about?" Linda demanded, though the truth was already crystallizing in her mind with horrible clarity. "I took $40 from the cash box after the meeting yesterday," Brittany admitted, her voice barely audible through her tears. "I used Ms. Patterson's key to get into the office this morning and put it back before first period. Nobody ever would have known if you hadn't called the police." Linda felt the blood drain from her face as the full scope of her mistake became clear. She had accused an innocent student of theft based on her daughter's lie, and now that student had been arrested and humiliated in front of the entire school. Worse, the money had been returned before anyone even realized it was missing. "Why didn't you tell me the truth when I asked you about it?" Linda asked, her voice hollow with dawning horror. "Because I knew you would lose your mind," Brittany replied, her words cutting through Linda's self-righteousness like a knife. "And because I was scared you would use it as another excuse to go after Marcus. You've been trying to get him in trouble since he beat me for student council president." The accusation stung because it contained an uncomfortable grain of truth. Linda had convinced herself that Marcus was somehow undeserving of his position, that his success came at the expense of students like Brittany, who really belonged at Jefferson High. She had been looking for an opportunity to prove that he wasn't as perfect as everyone believed. And when Brittany mentioned seeing Marcus near the cash box, Linda had jumped to conclusions that fit her existing prejudices. Linda's phone began ringing with calls from other parents who had heard about the arrest, and each conversation made her feel smaller and more cornered. The story was already spreading beyond the school community, picked up by local news outlets hungry for a story about injustice and racial bias. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, the Jefferson High School cafeteria was packed beyond capacity for the emergency school board meeting. Students, parents, teachers, and community members filled every available seat, with dozens more standing along the walls and crowding near the doors. The air was thick with tension and the low hum of angry conversations. Marcus sat in the front row with his grandmother and Dr. Chen, flanked by student council members who had arrived to show their support. David Kim had organized a social media campaign calling for justice, and dozens of students wore T-shirts reading, "We Stand with Marcus," that had been hastily printed that afternoon. Linda Morrison entered the cafeteria through a side door, accompanied by her husband and looking like she was walking to her own execution. The conversations died as people noticed her arrival, replaced by a hostile silence that made her steps echo loudly against the polished floor. School Board President James Rodriguez called the meeting to order, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled anger. "We are here tonight to address the completely unacceptable events that occurred at our school this morning. A student was arrested based on false accusations, and we owe both him and this community a full explanation of how this happened." Dr. Chen took the podium first, her voice steady as she recounted the morning's events with clinical precision. She explained how Linda Morrison had filed a police report claiming Marcus had stolen money, how the police had arrested him during the awards assembly, and how the subsequent investigation had revealed that no money was ever missing. "The lockbox containing student council funds was never tampered with," Dr. Chen announced, holding up bank records and receipts. "Every penny is accounted for, exactly as it was when Marcus helped count it yesterday afternoon. Mrs. Morrison's accusation was completely false." The crowd's reaction was immediate and intense. Parents shouted questions. Students called for Linda's punishment, and several people demanded to know what consequences she would face for her false report. The noise level rose until Mr. Rodriguez was forced to bang his gavel repeatedly to restore order. Marcus requested permission to speak, and the cafeteria fell silent as he approached the podium. His presence commanded respect, and even his harshest critics had to acknowledge the dignity with which he carried himself despite the morning's humiliation. "I want to start by thanking everyone who supported me today," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed room. "This morning was one of the worst experiences of my life, but seeing this community come together gives me hope." He paused, looking directly at Linda Morrison, who was staring at her hands in her lap. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you to look at me," Marcus continued, waiting until Linda reluctantly raised her eyes to meet his. "I need you to understand that I am not your enemy. I am a 17-year-old kid who works hard, gets good grades, and tries to make this school better for everyone. When you called the police on me this morning, you weren't just attacking me. You were attacking every student who looks like me, who comes from where I come from, who has to work twice as hard to be considered half as good." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Linda Morrison beginning to cry. Marcus's words had cut through the political rhetoric and legal implications to expose the human cost of prejudice and false accusations. "I forgive you," Marcus said, his words causing audible gasps throughout the cafeteria. "But forgiveness doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences. What you did today was wrong, and it hurt more people than just me. It hurt every student who will now worry that they could be next. It hurt every parent who trusted this school to protect their children from exactly this kind of injustice." Linda Morrison finally stood up, her face streaked with tears, and her carefully constructed composure completely shattered. "Marcus, I don't know how to apologize for what I've done. You're right about everything. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I made assumptions about you that were unfair and wrong." Her voice broke as she continued. "My daughter confessed to me this afternoon that she was the one who took money from the fund, and she returned it this morning before anyone noticed. I accused you of a crime that never even happened." The revelation that Brittany had been the actual thief sent a new wave of shock through the crowd. Parents turned to each other in disbelief. Students pulled out their phones to share the news, and the school board members exchanged grim looks as they realized the full scope of the situation. Dr. Chen returned to the podium with Detective Williams, who had arrived to provide the official police perspective on the morning's events. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be very clear about what happened today," Detective Williams announced. "Mrs. Morrison filed a false police report that resulted in the wrongful arrest of an innocent student. My department takes this very seriously, and we will be filing appropriate charges. The crowd erupted in applause, but Detective Williams raised his hand for silence. However, I also want to acknowledge that our department bears responsibility for how this situation was handled. We should have verified the allegations before making an arrest, especially in a school setting. We failed to protect a minor from a traumatic experience that could have been avoided with proper procedures. School Board President Rodriguez outlined the immediate consequences for Linda Morrison. She was banned from all school property and school events, removed from the PTA board, and prohibited from volunteering in any capacity. Additionally, the board voted unanimously to refer her case to the district attorney for prosecution of filing a false police report. But the most significant announcement came when Rodriguez revealed that Marcus would receive a full scholarship to any state university of his choice, funded by an emergency grant from the school district. While we cannot undo the harm that was done today, we can ensure that Marcus's educational future is secure and that he knows this community values and supports him. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes, with students chanting Marcus's name and parents wiping away tears. Dorothy Johnson stood beside her grandson, her face radiant with pride and relief as she watched the community rally around the boy she had raised to be strong, dignified, and forgiving even in the face of injustice. As the meeting wound down, several parents approached Linda Morrison to express their disappointment and anger. However, Marcus intervened, asking people to let her leave in peace. She is going to face consequences for what she did, but public humiliation isn't going to solve anything, he told the crowd. We need to focus on making sure this never happens again, not on revenge. In the weeks that followed, Linda Morrison pled guilty to filing a false police report and was sentenced to community service, probation, and mandatory diversity training. Brittany Morrison was transferred to another school district at her own request, unable to face the daily reminder of her role in the incident that had nearly destroyed an innocent student's reputation. Marcus returned to school the following Monday to find his locker decorated with flowers, cards, and messages of support from students, teachers, and community members. The story of his grace under pressure and his willingness to forgive had inspired people far beyond Jefferson High, and he began receiving scholarship offers from universities across the country. Dr. Chen implemented new policies requiring administrative review before any student could be removed from school property by police, and she established a bias reporting system that would allow students and staff to address discriminatory behavior before it escalated to false accusations. 6 months later, Marcus delivered the keynote address at Jefferson High School's graduation ceremony, speaking to a crowd that included college recruiters, civil rights leaders, and journalists who had followed his story. His message was simple but powerful. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Forgiveness is not weakness. And a community united is stronger than the prejudices that try to divide it. As he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, valedictorian medal, and full-ride scholarship letter, Marcus Johnson embodied the promise that truth, dignity, and perseverance could overcome even the ugliest manifestations of bias and hatred. The boy who had been arrested for a crime he didn't commit had become a symbol of hope and resilience, proving that sometimes the darkest moments reveal the brightest lights in a community's character. Dorothy Johnson watched from the audience, tears of pride streaming down her face as she realized that the 8-year-old boy she had taken in after tragedy had grown into a young man capable of transforming his own trauma into a force for positive change. The standing ovation that greeted Marcus's speech lasted longer than any in the school's history. a testament to a community that had learned to confront its own failings and choose justice over prejudice. Linda Morrison watched the graduation ceremony from her living room, having been banned from attending in person. As she saw Marcus cross the stage with grace and dignity intact, she was forced to confront the full measure of what her prejudice had nearly cost not just Marcus, but the entire community that had rallied to protect one of its own. Her false accusation had failed to destroy Marcus Johnson, but it had succeeded in exposing the darkness that prejudice breeds when left unchecked, serving as a permanent reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails when good people refuse to remain silent in the face of injustice.